Okay, apologies for the technical glitch. I now have my brother Romeo Busiko. Romeo, if you can hear me, good morning.
Yes, a very good morning, my brother Andrew Chamagero. I can hear you loud and clear right here at the residence of Dr. Paul Ssemwogerere right here in Rubaga. It's a beautiful Thursday morning with the very good gentleman right here who was the president of the DP from 1972 after replacing Benedicto Chuanuka all the way to 2005. Can you believe that? A wealth of experience that he brings to the Uganda's political terrain. But we are not here to talk about the life that is of Dr. Paul Ssemwogerere. We are here to talk about political financing and how it can protect Uganda's electoral system. But then, I'm sure my viewers would like to first know more about Dr. Paul Ssemwogerere. Did you know that he actually participated in the 1980 elections? Yes, he was a presidential aspirant, but he did lose to Mr. Obote right there. That is Obote 2 in 1980. He would later contest in another general election in 1996, the very, very first election that was actually conducted by the National Resistance Movement, and he lost to Yoweri Museveni, who received 4,428,000 votes in that regard. And my guest today received only 1,400,000 plus votes in that regard. A very good morning, Dr. Paul Ssemwogerere. Thank you for joining us on Morning at NTV.
Good morning.
First of all, before we get into the whole issue of how political party financing can protect Uganda's electoral laws, let me take you back to 1980. In 1971, you went into exile, came back in 1979. You were given a post in the Yusuf Lule administration. You were also a member of the National Consultative Commission in that regard, the interim parliament that was created to run the country after Idi Amin was ousted. So in 1980, Obote comes back, elections are held. Tell us more about that experience.
Well, I have to make a few corrections first. I was president of the Democratic Party in 1980, not 72, as you said.
What happened after when you replaced Benedicto Chuanuka in 72?
No, I did not replace him in 72. No, in 72, there were no organized elections. 71, we were in 69 to 71, we were in jail. We came out in 1971. And as life was coming back to normal, things went the wrong way. And Chuanuka was killed before parties were really properly restored, although I was still active. But the party functions were not on the books at that time. And I didn't go out in 71 or 72. I went out in 73 at the invitation of my former school in America as a visiting scholar. I didn't fly as a refugee, but I was invited by my school.
So historical accounts that indicate that Dr. Paul Ssemwogerere went into exile are wrong?
Yeah, it's not, strictly speaking, exile.
So when Benedicto Chuanuka is killed...
He was killed in 72 in September.
You replaced him as the DP president?
No, there was no election. Parties were not functioning.
So who assumed leadership in that position?
The party was in the minds of the people.
Yes.
But there were no structures which were functioning at that time when the army had just taken over, you understand. And the party, the Democratic Party, was restored into action in 1980. Right? That was after the overthrow of Idi Amin.
Yes.
And we had our first meeting in April 1980. That's when I was elected as president of the Democratic Party, and later in the year confirmed as president of the Democratic Party.
So that means from 71, 72 to 1980, there was no leadership within the Democratic Party?
No, there were no functioning parties. Not only for the Democratic Party, but for all the parties. We were not there. The parties came back on the books after the Moshi Conference and after the National Consultative Council was pushed to agree to have these parties function. So that is important to note. Then secondly, I was offered appointment by Professor Lule, which I declined, right? I was offered an appointment by President Ibn Isa, as minister, and I declined. So I was not in government.
After Ibn Isa ousted Yusuf Lule?
Even after, even during Lule's time, I was not a minister in his government. And I was not a minister in Ibn Isa's government. All right? I was a member of the National Consultative of the National Consultative Council, yes, but not a minister. And we were just trying to revive the party at that time. Now, when you come to the issues at stake, when you ask what was my experience during the 1980 elections, 1996 elections, I would like to say this. Uganda, and I'm sorry to say, even many other African countries, have had leaders who have been reluctant to really yield to free participation in political parties, let alone to be challenged by organized opponents in political parties. And this was the case in Uganda when Obote was first of all prime minister and then later on president. And as you know, the parties were banned under his administration in 1969, and the very day the Democratic Party was banned, along with all the other opposition political parties, that very day in December, many of us were arrested and detained under 1967 Public Order and Security Act without trial, and we stayed in jail.
So here you are in 1980. Obote wins the election.
Just a minute.
Yes.
Let me finish. So that shows the resentment or fear or rejection of multi-party system in this country, as it was in many other African countries. Then,
do you think the bias still exists?
Yes, there is that reluctance, there is that fear. They come 1980, the same leadership emerged. It's a long story which I can't go through now, how Obote became president. But the point is that when we came to the elections, they were tilted on the basis of the military involvement on the side of UPC. And you know, Obote even used to take pride in announcing his support from the military. So with that combination, the support of the military and leadership at the time in government, the elections itself was manipulated. I don't believe that Obote won those elections.
You do not believe Obote won the elections?
I don't believe that he won those elections.
Fast forward to 1996, you also participated in another election with President Yoweri Museveni.
Yes.
You garnered 1.4 million plus votes. You garnered 4.4 million plus votes.
A natural reflection of the support in the country.
Yeah, you refused to accept the results of the vote, but you did not go to court. Why?
You don't have to go to court all the time. I didn't go to court, but that is my position. On the basis of the way the Electoral Commission organized those elections, and the facts, some facts that we got to know, not only myself, but many people did form the opinion that those elections, the results of the 1980 elections, the results of the 1996 elections, were not a true reflection of the support that was obtained throughout the country.
Do you agree with other political experts when they say all the 5 presidential elections that have been conducted under the NRM government have not been free, fair, or credible in that case?
There is a lot of truth in making a statement that Uganda's elections, national elections, leave much to be desired.
Like?
You only have to read the reports of the international observers and the comments in the newspapers, essentially journalists, and also talk to people, informed people who were around at that time, whether they were judges, lawyers, political leaders, even within the government of that to draw a fair conclusion.
And indeed,
but by my conviction, that our elections have left much to be desired.
And indeed, Michael Owo, one of the EC commissioners in 1998, October 16th, he came out and he said the 1996 election was not free and fair, that there was actually underage voting within that election. He also recorded 54 malpractices, including vote rigging, voter intimidation, and doctoring of the voter register in that regard. Why did this commission wait for actually 2 years to come out with this pronunciation in 1998? Are officials scared of holding this government to account?
Are you surprised? When you have the security agencies allied with the incumbent in office, and they are relied upon to support the incumbent, what do you expect the officials who would like to reject the wrong announcements to do? Some will be bold enough to take a stand, but I can see...
Are you telling me the Independent Electoral Commission is not living up to its name of independence?
It is not independent. Uganda has not had a truly independent electoral commission, in my view. It requires reforms, drastic reforms, to have a truly independent electoral commission. There are examples. See, Ghana is doing something, as put in place, a more reliable electoral commission. South Africa, you have this in Germany. Germany is a very good case, and so on. So here we have a situation where structural reforms, which even call for constitutional reforms, in my view, are necessary to get a credible, totally independent, and well qualified.
But reforms have been called for since at least 2014. You had the National Consultation on Free and Fair Elections that proposed that the offices of the EC commissioners and staff be made public, and they should be subjected to vetting by the Judicial Service Commission. All this has not been implemented in that regard. Even the Supreme Court ruling of 2016 between Amama Mbabazi and President Museveni that warranted government to give or the Electoral Commission to give equal time to all candidates, it has not been actually worked on. Also the issue of non-compliance to the law, all that has not been adhered to. Parliament passed the laws in February of this year, but President has not assented to these agreements. Do you believe the President is worrisome of these amendments?
You can draw your conclusion.
But
you can draw the conclusion. Why the reluctance? Those are suggestions, well-intentioned, which would make a difference, but they have not been put in place. You only confirm what I've said, that since independence, it has been unfortunate for Uganda, and I say even for many other African countries, for leadership in place to really get convinced that a democratic multi-party system is essential for the the good development of the country, politically, economically, socially, and otherwise. We have a problem in this country. We have a problem in many African countries, even outside African countries. But I'm concerned most by my own country and by many African countries, where all evidence is clear that leadership in place is not sold the idea that their countries must be truly democratic and yield to the freedom of the people to decide who should be in place, what policies should be functioning, and have free and fair elections, to have democratic transfer of change of leadership based on the wishes of the people freely expressed. This is very central if we want to have really a well grown out program for the country, to develop.
And of course, in 1998, 1999, you introduced one of 5 very important petitions that saw the restoration of multi-party politics in Uganda in 2005-2006, where we had the first presidential election under a multi-party system. But in 2001, before those reforms were put in place, you had Besigye coming onto the political scene.
Yes.
Yes, he contended that he was cheated by President Museveni by a margin, but then 2 out of 3 justices said that there were irregularities in the election. And then 3 others said, yes, whereas there was cheating, it did not actually influence the outcome of the election. A same scenario befell the Electoral Commission in 2016 after Besigye came back from exile in 2005. In October, he was arrested in November around 14th. Released around November 23rd, nominated in jail. He was later released on February 6th, 2006 to campaign, and the campaigns were also being disrupted by security agencies in that regard. He also contested the election, but then 3 out of the 2 justices said, whereas there was the same argument in the first petition and the ruling, they said, whereas there were irregularities, they did not amount to and warrant a cancellation of the election. When you come to 2011, he lost again, but this time around there was no violence, but some more acts of bribery and voter intimidation. There are actually reports that the NRM spent between 20 to 75 billion on that election in 2011. Even though Besigye did not actually file a petition. Fast forward to 2016, we see Besigye again running up against Mr. Museveni with Amama Mbabazi, the former Secretary General of the NRM. So you had Mbabazi, who garnered 113,000 votes, petitioning the Supreme Court. And the person who was actually garnering the most votes, which is Besigye with 3.5, Museveni 5.9 million, he did not actually file a petition in that regard. But then help us understand, come 2021 elections, do you envisage that it will be devoid of the irregularities we've been seeing since the NRM started holding elections or organizing elections in 1996?
Well, about the narrative you have just made in the past, I can only make one comment. I am not surprised. I have made a statement which I don't withdraw. We have not had free and fair elections in this country since independence. And that is because leadership in place is not fully, has not been sold fully to the idea that Uganda must function as a truly democratic multi-party state. It is very sad that that is a statement I firmly believe in. And also because of that, some of the leadership in the key institutions which could even affect the thinking of the leadership, even affect the decisions on this matter. I'm not surprised that they are reluctant to state their mind so long as they are in this position, whether they are judges, or whether they are ministers, officers in police, officers in military. Some of them, even when they know the truth, fear who are reluctant to say so. So that explains some of the reasons why, even the case of Besigye, in my view, although he went to court several times, if he don't go, I can see why he don't go. And
he has lost faith in the process.
He has also explained why what happened to us not, to me, even not always end up in court. But you have made a good point that out of all that mess, I have put some faith in the judicial system. That is why I started these petitions to try to find space for the opposition parties in this country. And luckily, we got a judicial ruling which allowed which allowed the party to come back.
Okay, we have a little bit less than 15 minutes, so we are going to get into the conversation on political financing and how it can protect the electoral process in Uganda. But then first, I want to ask you this very pertinent question.
Right.
If you are the president of this country, and it wasn't President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, and we were dealing with COVID-19, would you look at COVID-19 as a situation that warrants a state of emergency? And would you hold elections under such circumstances, or would you call for a postponement by indulging Parliament?
Yes, COVID-19 is with us, and nobody can tell whether it will go away or not. It is most likely maybe it will not go away completely. But when I look at the forthcoming elections under the present constitutional setup, when I look at the operatives who will be in charge of these elections, notably the Electoral Commission, when I look at the laws in place, when I look at the extent to which the leadership in the government and in NRM has used the COVID-19 to expand the field of personal appointments and raise to a higher level of control of society.
Let me get this right, Dr. Paul Ssemwogerere.
Yes.
Are you trying to tell me that the NRM government is using the COVID-19 pandemic as a ploy to exert their domination on Ugandans?
Yes.
Please explain.
Yes, you can now see, if you look at the 1995 Constitution,
Yes, sir.
even if you look at the Local Government Act, what is the power of the Resident District Commission? It's not much there. When we were in the Constituent Assembly for the 1995 Constitution,
Yes.
we nearly got rid of this office of Resident District Commissioners. It was something created during the Bush War. It was no longer it was not something we should be carried on.
I think this is a very crucial moment. We should bring in that concept of political financing and how it can protect the electoral process. I understand you need to elaborate on your point, but we have a little less than 15 minutes, and you have a lot more to tell me about political financing. Let's just get into that conversation.
No, let me finish this question.
But how relevant is political financing in protecting the electoral processes in Uganda?
When you look at, I've got to finish my story. When you look at the powers now of the Resident District Commission, which is the exercise because of the COVID-19 invasion or pandemic, you can see that when you have an election here, under that kind of situation, it will already be tilted, it will be prejudiced in favor of the leadership in place. Now, when we come to political financing, political financing cannot overcome many of these structural weaknesses in society. Political financing will not by itself put in place a truly independent, authoritative electoral commission. Political financing will not change the mindset of the leadership in any of these security agencies, like the LDF, understand? It will not change the mindset of the resident district commissioners. It will not change the mentality of the leadership unless therefore, unless we supplement, we carry out actual structural reforms, which in my view call for constitutional reforms, which therefore in my view call for a getting together of Ugandans, whether they are DPs, NRM, FDC, and so on.
So constitutional reforms to avoid scenarios where the Electoral Commission chairman calls on the UPDF to attack a presidential candidate. The case of 2015, when the former EC chairperson Badu Chigundu threatened Besigye with the army.
Exactly. Where you get this Mr. Kale Kaihura, who is my friend, whose father was my friend.
The former IGP.
Yes. When he was being attacked for repressive measures by the police, he says, I work on orders from Museveni. You understand? And some of these people now in place, like the LDF, they actually shoot and kill people.
The LDUs?
Yes, the LDUs.
Local defense units.
Yes, they actually kill. And when they kill, they kill because they believe you have not carried out the wishes and instructions or directives of the president. They kill in his name. And this is a serious case. Now you go to you go to the offices of the police now. When they decide to fire tear gas at small meetings of political party leaders, I'm sure they believe they are carrying out the wishes of the president. And if they are doing so now, come election time, how much more will they do? Look at people like Zaki of Mutiana. This young man has his life really...
Indeed. And that begs to ask another question.
Then we take Bob Wine.
Bobby Wine, 2017.
And so many others.
2018.
Some are dead, some are in prison, some have been harmed seriously for life. So this is a very serious situation. And I myself suggest...
your suggestion?
I think it is very important for getting together and face this emergency and work out a way of getting serious reforms which are required to have not only elections taking place in sanity, but also for people in the country.
That is a wonderful argument. If you're just watching Morning at NTV, I'm talking to Dr. Paul Ssemwogerere. He's a formidable political veteran who was at the helm of the DP presidency from 1980 to 2005. That is about 25 years of wealth of experience in that regard. So you're telling me right now, Dr. Paul Ssemwogerere, that without constitutional reforms, it is useless to actually develop political financing in this country. It won't achieve that much without the electoral reforms.
By itself,
it's useless.
You see,
without a platform.
You need even to control the financing of the campaign of the incumbent. Is now an abuse of the incumbency. If you take the data about election campaign money at all the elections during all the elections we have had, you'll find that the people in the government spend a colossal amount of money, and the president himself, the presidential candidate, has been campaigning all along.
And does the meager funding on the opposition side,
even using the COVID?
Yes, and the meager funding from the opposition side, does it make it harder for them to participate in these electoral processes?
Of course.
The little money.
That money is really very little. you can't spend on the little money given to political parties to counter the money from the State House.
Could that be the reason they've been losing since at least
Well,
1996?
it is one of the reasons why political parties are persecuted, why many people even fear to belong, to fail to belong to political party or to leave.
But Dr. Paul Ssemwogerere, that is mind-boggling because we have an election that is forthcoming,
Yes.
and this election is going to be banking on virtual campaigns. And virtual campaigns, you're talking about 260 radio stations in the country, 40 TV stations. And keep this in mind. The argument right now is, will these TV stations and radio stations give equal time to these presidential, parliamentary, local government aspirants who are vying for these 1.5 million elective positions to actually send their message home? And if you also give me that argument of state apparatus, favoring the government, how is all this going to play out? Won't people be thrown out of the TVs and the radios?
Even if the TV stations gave ample time to all the political parties which are participating in the elections, that by itself is not sufficient to counter the money, for instance, which the government side has already started spending to tilt the elections in its own favor. In this, in a research finding by somebody called
Senkumba John.
Senkumba, he carried out a research in Kampala here, and he found that many people confess, or they confess during the interviews, that the money given to them at election time influences their vote. They admit it. And you know how much money has been spent in all the previous campaigns.
75 billion 2011.
Right? How much has been spent in donations? You have got, for instance, the Presidential Donation Fund. It started say in 2013, 2014, it was about 6 billion. Then it soared to 80 billion. And now it was just under 200 billion.
What kind of reforms do you want to see implemented to offer a level ground to all politicians?
Well, you've got to control, if you come, for instance, to a question of election, you've got to control the money that is spent by every person.
So they should be clear where their money is coming from.
And also how much, there should be a limit, how much money you are going to spend.
That was passed by Parliament, by the way. The President hasn't assented. Go ahead.
You see, you see, some democratic, operating democracy will prevent you from spending money that is so much that you actually control your political party. That you can't spend, for instance, more than half the money which is contributed by the other members. Because if you do that, then you will be dictating even from within your own party.
Finally, Dr. Paul Ssemwogerere, what will it take to remove or eliminate commercialization of politics from our society?
We must start the process, as I say, by getting together and realizing our problems. It's not just a question of money. It's a question of even the use of the military. This military in a democracy ought to be under the control of the civilians. And the civilians in power should be under the control of the population. This situation has not been accepted or has not been put in place. And we've got to start along those lines. That's why I say, even when you talk of political financing, the ideological, constitutional, and legal foundation is critical. You've got to start there. When we are agreed on that one, that is, we want to have Uganda move forward. It has got to be a democracy. We've got to respect the human rights of every person. We've got to put in place mechanisms for ensuring that law and order, the rule of law is going to be respected by everybody. When we start there, the rest can follow. And there you realize that public finance has got to be also so conditioned to ensure that it is fair to every person. Because right now, even under the iPod formula, it is already tilted on the side of the incumbents. How many members of parliament you have there?
In 2013, some recommendations were made, but the president up to now hasn't effected those recommendations of the iPod.
Yes, I'm telling you, for instance, we are functioning on winner takes all electoral system. Now, that does not automatically mean that the person who is elected in a constituency has a majority vote of the people in his own constituency. It means of all the people who are contesting in that constituency, he has got more than any other individual. But you can put together the other votes against him or her, and there may be more than those he has secured. And this is a faulty electoral system, particularly in a country as heterogeneous as Uganda. That's one of my strongest recommendations since 1980, that for a free and fair election, we should even change the electoral system, go proportional, where you are sure at the end of the day that every person who has been elected has or a party.
All right, Dr. Paul Ssemwogerere, unfortunately we've run out of time, but please look into that camera and give the young crop of politicians that are coming up now to tussle into this 2021 general election. What advice do you have for them?
Well, my advice is not to despair. My advice, particularly for the younger generation, is to embrace embrace democracy, embrace freedom of political decision making, and learn from other countries about their mistakes and their successes. Why are some countries stable? Why are some other countries unstable? Why is the political position safe in some countries and persecuted in other countries?
All right, Dr. Paul Ssemwogerere, a formidable political veteran who was at the helm of the DP presidency from 1980 all the way to 2005. Well, this conversation has come to an end. Back to you, Andrew Chamagero, in the studio. Continue with the rest of the information that we have for our people.
Oh, thank you so much, Busik. What an insightful conversation.